what's so important to me is that when you put yourself out there, when you line up against everybody else in the field, the best possible version of you and what you do is showing. Now, my name's Chris Courtney. I run this place. I'm the founder of New Pragmatic. I've been working in design education for like 15 years now. Been a designer for 20. And what's important to me is that you don't get yourself in a situation that really we all suffer with. And every designer I know has gone through some of the things that we've talked about in the other videos. And if you haven't watched the Career Guidance for Designers playlist, I encourage you to go check that out after this session. But we've covered in that playlist the decoding of job postings so that you have a better idea of what's actually in there. What are they really looking for? We've talked about building case studies and how to construct those in such a way that they have an impact and they resonate with the hiring manager. We've talked about your resume and your cover letter and the different things that you need to do to make those not only impactful, but produce a modern resume so that it can now deal with the AI that's likely going to be hitting against it. And then finally, interview prep. I heard from somebody just this week that watched the interview prep video, and that helped them get that next job. I'd never met them before. So we're getting a lot of positive feedback from the videos that are now available to you in the career guidance section. But there's one overarching video, one overarching session that was missing. Hi, Mylene. Good to see you there. There's one video that's missing, and that's portfolio construction. And I put a slash here for reconstruction. And there's a specific reason why this isn't a video just for the newbies. This is a video that's really more for the professionals. If you're just getting started with your career, you need this video, you need this session, because you need to begin thinking about what you're going to do to set yourself up. But if you are, hey Abraham, good to see you. But if you are somebody who's in the field, like I've been for 20 years, you need a plan for the reboot. And the reboot is one of the hardest things you will ever do as a designer. Because your portfolio process, and I use this scribble a lot, and this is what UX looks like. This is what a lot of visual design looks like. This is what I think every bit of front-end design I've ever done looks like. It's a lot of me going in circles. And then when we talk about your portfolio, it's this. It's a lot of fits, starts, stops, rollbacks, move forwards, think you've got it, maybe not. It's this big dance, and it's a big ball of twine that you're constantly trying to untangle. I get it. I get it because I've been there for 20 years. But I want to untangle that ball of crap. We've got to talk about some truths about our portfolios. And I say most because, you know what? There's a few of you out there. Let's say it's you. There's a few of you out there that know this, but most of us do not. Most of us don't realize, as we're doing it, that we're only building these portfolios for a job search. Like, almost every portfolio that I've ever seen is built specifically for the job search. That means it's hastily constructed. That means it's rarely updated during the search. And this is a big problem. If you put your portfolio out there and you're in the job search for 3 months, and that can happen. I was talking with one employer last year for 4 months. And, you know, these things happen. All right? Your job search can go on for months. If you hastily construct something to get it out there and then you don't update it, that's sending a signal to anybody who's considering you. It's like, wow, this portfolio hasn't updated at all since they talked to me months ago. These things have to be evolving. And if something is hastily constructed, it's likely heavily, quote, inspired. And what I mean by that is it looks like everything else out there. If you just slapped it together in a weekend, you know it's going to look like the last portfolio that you looked at. I can't see you with my eyes, but I can feel you nodding knowingly, knowing that you have done this or you have recognized this in the field. Feel free to respond in the chat if I'm wrong, but I think that we can all agree that most portfolios look like they're aping one another, and that's because they're hastily constructed. They just, we did it in a weekend because we had to get the portfolio out there. We were in a hurry because we wanted to apply for that job. If you've ever seen worstportfolioever.com, you'll recognize it because it looks like 90% of the design portfolios that are out there. Go check it out. It's a fun read. You will laugh and you will also ache and hurt at the same time. Also, these things are basically single use. They're disposable. Once you find a job, you never touch it again. And this is bad because this is supposed to be a representation of you. This is you as a designer. So, unless you need a new job, the portfolio just kind of sits there. And we can do better than that. So, what today is really all about, this session is really all about, is a plan. Putting together a master plan, as I called it, the master plan. Putting together a master plan that helps you break the cycle of rapidly pushing something together just so you can get it out there and apply for that job. There's several steps, but step one has nothing to do with the actual construction of the portfolio and has everything with you identifying the type of design job that you want to pursue. Now, this is going to require you to dig into job postings. And I don't want you to wait until you're ready to apply for a job to begin digging into job postings. As a matter of fact, if you're watching this and you're thinking about, hey, I want to be a designer, I want you to begin looking at job postings before you ever start your schooling, go through education, before you ever talk to a boot camp. I want you to look at the job postings. I want you to be keenly aware. Hey, Matal, good to see you. Man, boy, got a great group in here today. I want you to be keenly aware what's in those job postings so that you can start with the right foot moving forward. Now, this may sound like I'm asking you to do research. I'm asking you to, before you begin constructing something, to go educate yourself about that space. And that's exactly what I'm asking you to do. This is a project for you. The most important person you could build a project for is yourself. And so often, we don't do the requisite research. We're UX designers. Our lives are research, but yet, very rarely do we ever have the thought ahead of time, before we need the content, before we put the project together, to do the research. And you can't do research on a Friday and put your portfolio together on a Saturday and think that that is research, because the research is going to impact the types of projects that you're going to take that will eventually end up in your portfolio. And if we're thinking about this along a timeline, that means months in advance of the construction or the shipping off of a link to a portfolio, you need to be aware of the types of jobs that you want. Now, we've all seen a job posting like this, and this is kind of like the about the job area. And you'll see, 5 to 10 years of experience, and portfolio should solve a variety of problems, and proficiency in these tools, and curious and collaborative and empathy and emotional intelligence, and all. You get it. You've seen it. You've read it. I'm less concerned with that top part. That top part, that 5 to 10 years. We're talking about where you want to go, not where you're at right now. We want to be projecting into the future. So forget about the years of experience thing. What do they want you to know? Well, you must have a proficiency in these tools: Sketch, Adobe Creative Suite, InVision, Zeppelin. Notice I'm building this in Figma. Figma's not mentioned there, so Figma's not going to help you there. Or it could. You could talk about how all these design tools are relatively similar, and you could transpose those. You can translate those to those skills as necessary, or you could go do a project in Sketch next month. That would be a really easy way to just cut straight across it. I'm going. You know what? The job that I want, the company I want, they use Zeppelin. I've never used Zeppelin. I'll go do a project in Zeppelin. That's how you begin to educate yourself on the steps you need to take before you're ever creating your portfolio. The other thing, love a startup environment. You're a problem solver. That should tell you right away that anything that you put together needs to be solution based. Because if it's just pretty, if it's just a prototype and it's just an example of something that could be done and it doesn't solve a problem, it's still not going to quite meet the criteria. Here's another one. This is a totally different job posting about the work. You're going to do user research, sense making, go look that one up, ideation, that's just not really a word, prototyping, user testing. You're responsible for interaction design, visual design, prototyping. Get an idea of what needs to be in your portfolio for a job like that. Each of you is going to have a different set of requirements based on where you want to go. And ultimately, this begins to flavor the next project, the next step forward you take. It's all in service of getting to that ideal job. And that ideal job requires certain things. And I need to be able to talk about and show those certain things in my portfolio. So the second step, and this is one that I get a lot from people that say, well, I don't have that job yet. To do those things, I need that job. And I don't have that job, so how can I then do those things? I want you to begin positioning from where you're at right now. And I've got some examples of people who have done that before. Ultimately, in a UX portfolio, for instance, you are displaying your problem-solving abilities. In a visual design portfolio, you're displaying your ability to design something that is attractive, frankly. In a front-end portfolio, you're showing your ability to utilize the tools of front-end design. All of these things can be done without having a, quote, design job. So before you begin backing into a hole and saying, well, wait, I can't do that because I don't have that job yet, I want to show something to you. This was something in the Nielsen Norman group, NNG. If you don't follow this is a great group to follow. Sign up for the newsletter, all of that. This post was posted a while back by a lady by the name of Susan Farrell. Everything I needed to know about good user experience I learned while working in restaurants. Now, this is an interesting twist because last I checked, when we talked about experience, we're talking about applications, we're talking about how you sign up for things, and we're talking about the UI. Like, how would you get any of this from a restaurant? And as you can see, these are the things that she talks about in the article. Error handling, user onboarding, redesigns, community management, expert users, UI design. There is a lot that you can do from right where you stand to begin your design journey forward. And we'll talk about how you elevate these things to the point that they come across as experience for people. But understand that you don't have to go out and get that design job to begin moving forward. Former student of mine did the following, and I can honestly tell you I did not prompt her to write her about page this way. This is what naturally came out of her, and I was blown away by the initiative. Sam's life lessons turned into UX values. Art direction. Oddly enough, waiting tables and bartending. Law school. Anything that can be designed is design experience. If you take something of value away from that opportunity. So when we talk about UX and we talk about experience, I really believe your experience and how somebody perceives your experience is all about the situation you're in and how you frame it for somebody else. If you worked, for instance, I worked as a line cook for a long time as I was going through college, and I can specifically think about things that we did on that line to make it more efficient, ways that we redesigned the operation and workflow. Now, I never would have thought at that point in time of how to write eloquently about the moving of the cheese and the pepperoni and the sauce for the pizza line in a way that made it faster and more efficient and lowered our waste cost. But that's exactly what we do when we do user experience design. We look for efficiencies. We look for ways to make things better for people. We specifically look for ways to make things not harm people. And it's all about framing those things. And the other thing I want to point out is you can't wait to sit down in an interview and begin talking about that with somebody who is interviewing you. You have to get that story, get that across before somebody talks to you. And that brings us to our next step. You need to begin writing. This is one of the fastest growing requirements of designers. And I'll be honest with you, it's always been there. It's just in this era where visual design is just kind of a given. If you're going to be a designer, you've got good visual design skills. Now I want to know about something else. So when things become a given, I move on to other requirements. And the requirement that keeps popping up over and over and over is writing. Your ability to use language to communicate with a user, with a team, is highly sought after. And that's because, and I think this illustrates it well, when you go to write your case studies, you're going to find that it's really hard. But the underlying truth of that is writing is hard. Writing is extremely hard. I was in journalism for 15 years, and it wasn't until like the fourth or fifth year of that experience that I had somebody really sit down with me and say, listen, to get any better at this, you're going to have to do more of it. And to do more of it, you're going to have to let go of this fear of getting it wrong. You're going to get it wrong. People are going to read it. They're going to give you feedback. Editors are going to give you feedback. And ultimately, that feedback sometimes going to hurt, but it's going to make you better. And the more you do it, the more feedback you get, the better you get at it. So for you, I need you to practice more. I need you to write more. I don't need you to wait for your portfolio, for a case study to come down the pipe and have this giant thing in front of you, and you're trying to figure out how to craft a story. I need you writing about things that aren't giant case studies. I need you to write about the things you're learning, the things you're doing. And really, that's the issue with most people I talk to. It's like I have nothing there's nothing I could write about that would be of interest to people. And that's not entirely true, A. And B, who said it had to be interesting to people? I need you practicing writing. I don't necessarily need you to write Moby Dick or any number of, I don't need you don't have to have a hot take, all right? Everything as of late has devolved into, I've got to have a hot take on Twitter, otherwise I won't write something on Twitter. You're communicating. You don't have to have something that has 12,000 likes for it to be worthy of being written. And that's something that this particular age has locked up on. Oh, I didn't get enough likes, so people must not have liked that. I'm going to take it back down. Don't take it down. I've got posts on LinkedIn right now that have gotten like 12 views. And I've got posts on LinkedIn, I've got 500 views. And you know what? One is not more valuable than the other. Maybe in terms of like reach and whatnot, great. But that's not the point here. The point here is writing, the act of writing. So my first request of you is to write about what you're learning. And I realize this feels like, man, we're really getting off the portfolio topic, aren't we? Well, to craft a better portfolio, you need better writing. And to have better writing, you need to write more. So the first thing I would do is write about what you're learning. Mario here wrote about what he learned in his first year after completing a boot camp. Most people write like during the boot camp. It's really important that you keep writing after as much as it is that you keep writing during. And really the real key here is to keep writing. You know, some people, students of mine, and again, I can't claim credit for this, but this is something that I've witnessed, and it's really opened my eyes to just how many different ways you can get your work out there now versus 10 years ago. A lot of people are using Medium to just post case studies. Cody Dennis, who some of you may know, former student of mine, works in San Francisco. Before he had a portfolio together, he wrote his case study and posted it on Medium, and was getting requests for interviews. I think that unlocking that opportunity not only showed him the power of just posting your work. You don't have to wait for the portfolio, but it also gave him an opportunity to like really kind of, how does this fit together? What do? I don't want to worry about the portfolio yet. I just want to write. And that's a very powerful thing to have. So from Abraham, does it have to be design-related writing or any writing like creative writing, etc.? You know, Abraham, I think that's a great question. And to be honest with you, I think it could be any type of writing. We're going to talk about editing in just a moment, but there is a line where you will separate the concerns. So you may have a lot of creative writing. That's great. It's not going to go in your portfolio. You may not link to it from the homepage, but it's of value to you. You're getting practice writing. So I do think that type of writing is extremely valuable. I do not think that you have to. I don't think that just like every project you have won't be a candidate to be in your portfolio. Everything that you write won't be a candidate to be in your portfolio either. Okay? So I really do think more writing is better than less writing, but at the same time, not all of it's going to go in your portfolio. So just be aware of that. Now, if somebody searches for you and says, stories and whatnot on Medium, and they look at your profile, they might find it that way. But we're talking specifically about preparing yourself to create a better portfolio. And frankly, the more you write, the more comfortable you're going to be with writing. The other thing that I want to point out, this is rapidly growing in interest, particularly the concept of UX writing. UX writing is a little different than conversational writing or creative writing. It's about knowing how to really communicate the intent and purpose to the user in such a way that sounds human and approachable and useful. And writing, John Mader wrote about this. Lau here writes about it as well. Writing is considered to be one of the unicorn skills. The value of a designer is no longer just the ability to solve problems, the ability to craft something that is approachable and usable. It's also the ability to communicate, and writing is central to that. So, bonus here is if you're good at writing, you're going to get hired quicker. It's just it's that easy. It's not even really debatable at this point. So step 4, and this is really important. This is the part that I think kills most portfolio updates and reboots. It's really important. The ability to actually take inventory of what you have. There is nothing that will teach you the value of file management quite the way of banging your head against your desk at 2 a.m. looking for a file that you have but cannot find. That is the missing piece of your piece de resistance for your case study. Nothing quite like it. And what do I mean by that? Well, you want this. You want some sort of orderly project organization. Here, I've got, inside of content, I have this assets folder, and here's all these assets, and then I have blog, and you want your project organized in such an orderly, neat fashion. What you don't want is this, which is just like madness. There's just crap everywhere, and it's just like everything from your desktop is dumped into the file drawer. It's like that kitchen drawer that nobody wants to go into. That's a lot of computers. And somewhere in all this crap are your project files. I really, really, really encourage you to do a better job of organizing your files so that actually building your portfolio is an approachable exercise. This is something that you don't do when you sit down to build your portfolio. This is something you do as you go through the process of building a project, and you think to yourself, I need to make sure this is really well organized because I'm going to need to come back to this soon so I can update my portfolio. That shouldn't be the main reason you're doing this, but if nothing else gets you on the file management bandwagon, let it be this. And if you're really terrible at file management, I would propose this half step. At the end of each project, you're going to have to give up a Saturday just to organize all the files that you've saved in all the different places so that you can come back to this and do this properly. Don't wait 6 months and then try to go back to a project 3 months ago. Stuff will be gone. You'll forget about it. It won't be clear what's missing. You just know something's missing. It's a recipe for disaster. So, there's no better time to get started on this than literally right this second. Stop watching this video. Go do it right now. I am that serious about it. File management, organization is what's going to keep you from having the strongest portfolio possible. It's what's going to keep you from updating your portfolio as often as you should. Again, can't underscore this enough. This is what kills most people when they try to build a portfolio. It's file management. So, Abraham, back to your question about creative writing or design-related writing. The fifth step in this, and we've gone through a lot of steps, but the fifth step in this, and I think this is really key, is we got to get real serious with ourselves about what goes in that portfolio. You got to kill your babies, kill your idols. The future you doesn't want to see college you. And this jumps out at me really clearly when I think back. I had a student back in 2015, and really talented student, ended up doing amazing work. But when he first arrived, he showed me his quote portfolio. And the portfolio was a lot of things that he had done, like for family members or something I did on the side, or this was something I entered in an art fair. And it did not project to me somebody that would be a professional designer. It projected to me somebody who did a lot of family projects for people who needed something creatively done, and it ended up with like 12 fonts, and they weren't really all sized right, and why was that color used, and what was this really trying to solve? Those things. So everything that you've created will not be in your portfolio, and I need you to grapple with that right now, because your portfolio is as good as the worst thing that you have in it. I used to say this. Actually, this is a statement that I've actually altered over the years, because I had an editor one time that said the edition of the paper that we put out. I used to work in news media. This edition is as good as the worst story that's in it, and that meant that we needed to cut the fat. We needed to tighten it up. If it didn't deserve to be in the edition, don't just slide it in because we've got the space. Find some other way to make use of the space. And print was really interesting because print was, it's a set size. The page is the same size every day, and there's 12 of them, and you've got to fill it up. All right, that's a little different mentality than what we have here. you're not trapped by the constraints of space. You do not have to, quote, fill it up. You can make it as small and succinct as you want to. But realize that your portfolio is only as strong as the weakest thing that's in it. And if it happens to be your photographs from 11th grade AP photo, then you should drop those. If it happens to be that thing you made for Aunt Martha, then you should drop that thing you made for Aunt Martha, because it's not projecting where you're at now. Okay? So this is something else that a lot of people struggle with. It's like, how many projects do I need in my portfolio? I've got 10. Do I need 7? No, you need 1. You actually only need 1 good project. And I would even go so far as to say you don't need really any, quote, good projects. What you need is you need to show growth. You need to show humility. You need to show where you've made mistakes along the way and how you grew from that. I don't trust a portfolio that doesn't show any flaws. I want to see flaws because I want to see how you've grown over time. So you only need 1 good project, but if you don't have that, don't think that you don't have a good portfolio. Think about what's in those case studies that you're showing me. And while you want to feature your best work, you also want to write about what you've learned. And this goes back to what I just said just a moment ago. If your portfolio, if you're going through the case study and I don't see where you've run up against an issue, I really don't think you've designed this, and I don't think you've designed anything that's tried to solve a problem. Most people, when we solve problems, most people will fail, at least initially, at solving that problem. You may never solve the problem for a variety of different reasons. I want to know about it. I want you to share that with me so that I can see how you think. What is your thought process like? What are the next steps that you what'd you do differently on the next project? I want to see that evolution. And for some of you, you're not going to necessarily show an evolution because you're only going to show your best work, but you're going to show your evolution through that project. Because your best work doesn't have to be perfect work from front to back. It has to be something that shows growth. And maybe it became this bang up thing at the end, but midway through you were caught sideways because you didn't quite know how to work through a particular issue, and it took testing or it took research. Something broke you through. What was it? Those are the types of things that we need. Those are the types of things that we need for you to be able to illustrate as in your projects. The 6th step is really, I think, the hardest step, because when you're going through this, and we started off by searching for the type of job that we wanted, and then we repositioned ourselves in our current position to begin taking steps toward that particular job. And then it all became about writing and practice and taking account of what we have, and then editing down what we have. Now we're at the point where we have to look at the body of work. We have to look at the body of work, and we have to ask ourselves, do we have what we need to apply for that job, to apply for those types of jobs? Because the job that you initially identified, or the types of jobs that you initially identified, they'll be long past. Those were filled long ago. Those were filled before you started this journey. Now you're recalibrating. It's 3 months later or whatever. You're recalibrating and looking at what's available right now. And do I have what I need? Had a question come in from Marty. Let's see here. So when you say flaws, you mean the iterations included in making the project and what you learn from each one? Or should you show growth from project to project? So I think project to project is really interesting, because project to project is going to always involve different teams. And my worry with project to project growth is, am I seeing you grow, or am I seeing you just with a different group of people, and suddenly that a different output came out. I like to see growth within the project, because in those instances, the team didn't necessarily change. The dynamic is set. It's there. You're working through a problem, and how did you get to the other side? There's like a bridge. The bridge is out right there. How did you get across the river? So I want to see it in that particular project. I do think project to project growth is really interesting, but I struggle with project to project growth when it's not an ongoing problem. It's like one project you were solving for this problem, and the next project you probably weren't solving for the same problem. You're probably solving for some other problem. So I do prefer to see the growth in each project rather than trying to string them between the projects. I hope that helps. Back to this though, because you're going to have, much like Marty's question, the growth. Have I shown it? Do I have what it takes to go apply for that job? I said that I wanted to do job X. I've now taken account of everything. I've edited things down. Do I have enough to be confident to step forward and apply? If the answer is yes, you're awesome and you are way braver than me. I salute you, and full speed ahead, Godspeed, and all those things. You're going to be amazing. However, if you said no, hi, welcome to my world. I'm glad that I'm not here by myself. Thank you. If you search for imposter syndrome in design, you're going to get a few results. And it's when you're doing this assessment of do I have enough, that you're going to feel this pull. Most of you. Very few, frankly, will say, yeah, I've totally got this and gonna nail it. Very few people. And if you do say that, caution, you may have a bit too much ego, and it's gonna get quashed. When you search designer imposter syndrome, only 269,000 results come up in Google. That's all. It's a really small number. No, it's not a small number. It's crushing, actually. But I want you to know that we all feel that way a little, okay? And there's a lot of positive energy that you can draw off of that. Imposter syndrome isn't bad. It keeps you moving forward. But it's bad if it holds you back. And there are some ways that you can begin filling in this gap, even if you aren't in a design role right now, even if you don't have enough work in your portfolio to go get that next job. And I want to talk about some of the ways we can use that, and let's use that awareness. So rather than just like taking all this time and applying to a bunch of jobs that we are not qualified for, let's use that awareness of what isn't in our portfolio and begin knocking it down. So I want you to seek out opportunities that aren't full-time. If you are in a situation where you know what type of work you want to do, but your portfolio doesn't have quite what you believe you need to do it, and sometimes you can be in a situation where you've sent out your portfolio and it's crickets. It's crickets. You haven't heard anything. This is at that point, I want you to do this. One, I want you to go into LinkedIn, type in UX or front end, whatever, visual design intern, and I want you to look at the internship opportunities. Just in Chicago alone, there are 82 opportunities for design interns. Cohesion, Crate and Barrel, iManage, you name it, they're out there. The second thing, Upwork is a pretty good way to begin trying to find smaller jobs that will help you fill in the portfolio. The one thing I would put out here as a caveat on Upwork is, typically speaking, this is where you have to bid on jobs, and that can get blind bidding is never really a good feeling, and you always feel like, well, I've got to underbid somebody else. So that's something to take in with a grain of salt. If you do go the Upwork route, I would encourage you to produce a wide range. I was just talking with Laura, one of my students, former students, Laura, yesterday, and I encouraged her to produce a wide range and invite a conversation to talk about the details of their work. Typically speaking, you'd want to have a conversation before you produced a bid, but with something like Upwork, you have to kind of produce a bid before. So set the range wide, acknowledge that it can come in and go either way, but there's a range, and you need to have a further conversation with them to determine where exactly in that range that it would be. Volunteer match is another excellent way to begin fleshing out your portfolio. There's 105 virtual volunteer opportunities available in the field of UX right now. And what virtual means is it's remote. So if you're in some small town in Minnesota or Wyoming and you can't get to a tech hub to do an internship, or you can't acquire the experience needed through freelance because there's just not a lot of jobs in your town, I would seek out Volunteer Match and begin doing a remote UX project or remote front end project so that you can have that experience added to your portfolio. And then finally, if you happen to be in a hub, like I'm here in Chicago, networking. Networking is one of the easiest ways to begin meeting other people and finding out about opportunities or little side projects. There's almost always somebody with a startup somewhere that needs assistance and they haven't officially reached out and found somebody. Going to design meetups in your town is an excellent way to do that. Again, if you're not in a big city, I would say that doing remote meetups on like Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn are other options. Slack channels are also very popular for remote Q&A sessions that turn into virtual meetups. But meeting people in person is always helpful, and that's why a networking group, not like a, and I want to be perfectly clear, you want to meet people that you don't already know. All right, so a meetup here where I'm talking to a bunch of friends and former students that I've known for several years now. That's not going to be where you discover those new opportunities. You want to dive into a pool of people that you've never met before, and that's typically going to be in one of those networking opportunities. So, final step in this, and this just kind of a wrap up of what we've talked about to this point, is you're going to want to approach this very humble, and you're going to want to show growth and mistakes. A portfolio that doesn't show mistakes, I simply don't trust them, because frankly, nobody has a perfect portfolio. It doesn't exist. My concept of perfect and your concept of perfect are completely different. So the idea that anybody could have a perfect portfolio to somebody else, insane. Not going to happen. So with that, understand that imperfections are the true mark of experience. And that's what everybody, how do I show 5 to 10 years of experience? Well, if you've got 5 to 10 years of experience, you're going to have some scuff marks, okay? It's not going to be a pretty facade. There's going to be some bullet holes in there, and I want to know how the hell you got back up off the ground. I want to know how you got through that experience. So, own your mistakes, and I'm going to leave you with this final bit. This is from Jared Spool, and if you don't follow Jared Spool on Twitter, I would change that. He's been doing UX design for, I don't know, ever. I think UX used to be on stone tablets when Jared started. But to read this directly, key phrase is missing from practically every portfolio case study I read. And the challenge we ran into was I realized we didn't understand. Our first attempt to address the challenge was we learned these critical things we never knew about our users. That kind of sums up what we've talked about here. We've talked about not portraying ourselves as the arbiters of perfection. We've talked about showing growth over the project. That's essentially it. He goes on. Portfolio case studies that portray the project as proceeding perfectly as planned are not realistic, not interesting, not showing the most important facet of your skill set, your capacity to learn and adapt. I agree 100%. I can't argue with any of those points. I think it's something that when you should take it into account when industry leaders like Jared and myself are pushing you to show your growth and pushing for you to show where mistakes were made. That's ultimately going to position you to put forth the best possible portfolio to show your experience, to show how you have experience. And if everybody's looking for experience, it's got to be 1 to 3 years, 5 or whatever years. If everybody's looking for experience, the easiest way to show experience is to show that you've made mistakes along the way. Only an inexperienced person wouldn't have any mistakes. So portfolios are best when you construct them over time. Slow cook your portfolio, okay, people? Don't rush in one week and say, I got to apply for this job. I understand that may be where you're at right now, but it doesn't have to be. And if you're coming into the program and you're watching this for the first time, I want you to know that the reason I set this up this way, where you are asked to identify, you're calling your shot. I want to go over there. That's great. I want you to hold on to that nugget of knowledge. You know where you're wanting to go. Every step along the way that we take moving forward is going to be toward that. But you can't get there in a weekend, okay? You can't fake your way there. As I stated before, if you have experience, you're going to show that you've made mistakes. If you don't have experience, you didn't make any mistakes and you made a mock-up and off you go. The slow construction becomes part of the evolution of you as a designer. A portfolio you make today will not be as good as a portfolio that you've made with many weeks and months of effort in creating the projects that go into it. The portfolio that continues evolving also draws interest from people who are watching you. So your portfolio, when you apply for a job, even after months of this has gone on, when you apply for a job, that doesn't mean that the portfolio process stops at that point. It has to keep evolving. And the other thing that this all avoids is you never get into that rush that, oh my God, I got to update my portfolio for this thing. No, I have a portfolio. I've updated it recently. I will update it again soon, but I'm going to apply for this job today. This is what happens when you're constantly working on your portfolio over time. No more rushed portfolios. And, frankly, I want you to flex those writing muscles. Don't wait for your case studies. Don't wait for your case studies to begin writing and practicing the craft of writing. No, you don't have to have a project. You don't have to have a client to begin working on your writing skills. All you have to have is you and an editor and setting down and writing. And then, you know what? This is something a lot of people don't do. Read what you've written. Take the time to read what you've written. On the second pass, you wrote it out at 3 o'clock in the morning, you set it down, you shipped it, whatever. Wake up the next morning, read it, and then cringe, because there will be some things in there like, why did I do that? It's not just you, it's everybody who tries to set with their own words. If you think that's hard, try listening to yourself. Hi, I do that all the time, and it's cringeworthy. I hate my own voice. But it's what we do. It's what we do as designers. We have to produce and then reflect, consume, and then edit. Edit. And this displays growth over time. So with that, the floor is open. You've been asking some questions. But I want to encourage all of you, if you've got a question at this point in time, to go ahead and fire it off in the chat. I'm happy to take any and all questions that you might have. We'll give this a second to catch up, because I know the live stream has like a 20-second delay. But good group overall. I'm very happy to see so many and there's actually some new faces in here, so that's nice. Um, Also, actually, this is one that came out recently. Um, had a student with a question related to visual design projects and projects that were only done in a vacuum, like a redesign, or a class project where they redesign an existing an existing site. I would keep those out of your portfolio, or I would list them in another section that isn't primary on like your portfolio, like other work, something like that. Um, redesign projects are not, or redesign projects are rarely done with an awareness of the constraints the original team had when working on that project, so they can come off very frankly short-sighted. Sometimes they really tick people off because it's like, well, of course your design looks better because you didn't have to deal with X constraint. Of course your design works better because you didn't have to deal with X security requirement. Um, the awareness of those things means that you would have had to have a conversation with the team that built those things, or with the company that had that constructed. So I would keep those sorts of things out of the portfolio. Those are great for you as exercises to grow your design skills and how you make a prototype and how you make a visual design, but not necessarily something that I would personally put in a portfolio. We have a couple of questions here. Um, Yeah, should you try to include some small Metal here? Should you try to include some small side projects that you've worked on, or would it make us not look so great? Really depends on the quality. It depends on the quality. I've seen small projects that would like really shine. Okay, but I've also seen small side projects that just they seem out of scale with the other work that you've shown. But here's something to remember about most design projects. They will not all be 3 and 6 month projects. Some of the design projects that you work on will be like, yeah, I worked on this for a week, or I worked on this for a couple of days. The biggest thing that I want you to do in those instances is realize that you need to add a field somewhere on that case study that says, this is how long I worked on this, and make it really prominent so people are not judging a project that you worked on for 3 months versus a project that you worked on for 3 days, or a project that you worked on at a hackathon. Okay, um, so those considerations really need to come into play. But also, I would say that if you're wanting to show real growth, another thing that you probably want to do is understand that a larger project is probably going to show your ability to stretch and do research and do a lot more work with a team than a small project would. But really, I would say I would rarely lead with a small project. I would lead with the meatier thing, because you want to show how you think and how you attack a problem. And the smaller projects, they tend to not have that same weight to them. So I hope that helps. The other thing I'll point out is, if you have a question that you have not had an opportunity to ask, or if you're watching this later, as I know more of you will do, feel free to jump into the Slack channel. You can sign up for it at newpragmatic.com, and we would love to have you in there as part of our daily conversation. Another question just came in. Is there a tone in portfolio writing that shines more than another? So portfolio writing, there's a couple things that I would really encourage you to do. One, realize the type of audience that you're going for. I would say this, that if you were working for a Silicon Valley startup or organization, if you're working for a tech-oriented organization, you're going to present that differently than if you're working for, like, if you're trying to apply to a banking institution. So the types of work that you do will be more and less formal as you go, and that should be reflected toward the types of work. I want to work in finance. Okay, well, write this a little more buttoned up. I want to work in tech or e-commerce. Okay, a little looser is probably okay. You know, I would avoid. Here's the thing. I would avoid ever being too loose with my language. Avoid the curse words and slang and things like that. It's a lot like dressing for a party. It's really hard to overdress. And if you're way overdressed, that probably means that isn't the crowd for you anyway. So I would probably keep it a little more on the formal side, and lean formal, but don't feel like that you have to be clinical. And when I say clinical, we've all read, or maybe you haven't, but most of us have seen a white paper, and we realize just how boring that writing can be. Try to keep it to where your writing is engaging, it's interesting. You don't have to be a comedian. It helps if you drop a joke here or there, but every other line of your case study shouldn't be like an inside joke. If you happen to have one, that's okay, but realize that you're writing for a job, not to play a part in a Seth Rogen film. Okay? So, other questions before we wrap up? If you didn't get a chance to ask, jump into the New Pragmatic Slack channel. Sign up at newpragmatic.com. Otherwise, I'm Chris Courtney. This has been great. So great having so many of you jump into the chat. It's great having you around. Starting next week, we're going to shift gears for some special topics focused on UX. This wraps up our career sessions for the moment, and I hope that you will all tune in then when we begin talking about design thinking and systems design. Until then, talk soon.